Welcome to day 4. Today we had a talk from Dr. Lori Brink. She's a Dominican. Spoke about presence, prophecy, and passion. Presence being an encounter. First we encounter God, as we know, through prayer, but it leads to a call, and then to communion as we walk this journey together. And she says if you look at the stories of Abraham, moving through Canaan, if you look at the prophets Amos, Isaiah, Jeremiah, if you look at Peter and his interactions with Jesus, he says they all carry this theme of encounter, call, and communion. Take Peter, for example, as he's looking the right side of his boat, and Jesus says, cast your net out there, and he pulls it in, and it's full of fish. And in that moment, that miracle, Peter says to Jesus, I'm a sinful man. There's this act of humility. And then he, after encountering this person, he hears Jesus say to him, I'm going to make you a fisher of men now. So there's this commissioning, this call. And then, as we know, Peter becomes part of this community of disciples that follow Jesus and that do this together and support each other on the way. So it's interesting that encounter, call, and communion take place in different ways, and that through this time and this process that is taken in their relationship with Jesus, they're being tested and formed for what is to come. Dr. Lori mentions there's a sense of unworthiness. There's a reassurance that happens along the way, sometimes multiple times, and that they're commissioned then to move forward at the proper time with the gifts that they have, with the reassurance that they'll do this with others and with Christ being with them along the journey. She also went on to talk about communion in particular. She says in Mark 10, it states that you'll receive 100 times, blessings in this life, brothers and sisters and so on, when you give up something for the response that we make to being called and being commissioned. She talked about Mary and Elizabeth having a mutual goal, that they are in communion with each other as they bear new life for the sake of this mission. They are becoming one with the divine, makes us friends, makes them and makes us all friends of God, and extends our communion to those around us. So communion is never just for us, it's always meant to be shared. And also she mentioned that it must lead to actions and proclamation, that both are kind of tied together, and in this love and this commissioning impels us to share the good news and then to reveal how the good news takes place in our everyday actions. Formation directors, she says, are the translators who provide a spiritual vocabulary to help new people articulate their encounter with the divine. She says if you look at history, prophets, they're divine representatives and human and advocates of humanity. They're not self-declared. She says oftentimes we talk about ourselves like we're trying to be, or we are a prophetic community, or I am a prophetic person. She says you can't really declare it. It happens over time, and it's declared by other people. She also says that God insists and persists along the way. If you look at Jeremiah, he resists, but I'm just a boy, and so on. And there's all these excuses kind of along the way where he's battling this. But once the battle's over, it's interesting that he then becomes on fire with prophetic words and deeds that really move the hearts and minds of those around him. There's a book that she mentioned called Prophetic Dialogue. She recommended it and said it is just an excellent book to take a deeper look into this whole idea of being prophetic. Pope Francis, she brought up, is a way that must be forged. There must be a way forged for everyone to benefit from the fruits of the earth. She says this is prophetic, for our day and age. And to have the Pope come forward with all these, voices united that have been proclaiming this and saying this is something we need to work on, she says is an example of being prophetic. She also brought up a question from Ita Ford. And the question that she asked herself when she was working with the poor and the suffering around her was, am I willing to suffer with these people? Is this something that we really feel that we can do? You know, it's one thing to be called and commissioned, but then what is our response? And how are we wrestling with that question of, am I willing to suffer with these people? And do I see this as becoming more human? Other interesting points that were made along the way. She talked about us being engaged participants in this passion of Christ. And that, there's things about us that are finite, but in entering into this mystery of his mission and his life and how it's eternal, we get to be part of something that is eternal. We'll run into self-doubt, uncertainty, apathy, and all sorts of other things that get in the way, as have gotten in the way for many people who have gone before us. But that, this perseverance and this time in being tested are all part of it, to help our faith to grow and mature. She talks about if Jesus isn't our center, then, the sacrifices we make eventually don't make sense over time. We'll have good feelings associated with them, good things will be the outcome and so on, but that fire will eventually go out because it's not connected to the source of our inspiration. Presence and prophecy are completed in passion. And we go back to presence and prophecy sometimes in this cycle that lead to passion again. So if we find we're losing passion, we can go back to presence. How's my prayer life? How am I present to Christ? How is Christ present to me? And calling me forth to be prophetic in word and deed. And then moving out again in a new situation and circumstance perhaps. And that this needs to repeat itself. But the outcome obviously has different expressions each and every time.